They told him there were no rooms left until someone else walked in. What they didn't know was that the man they rejected wasn't just any traveler. He was a billionaire, with the power to rewrite their fate. The rain drizzled softly over the bustling streets of Naples, Florida, casting a reflective sheen on the pavement. The Grand Horizon Hotel, a luxury landmark nestled in the heart of the city, glowed with golden lights from the chandeliers that could be seen through the glass doors. It was a place where the well-off came to stay, a symbol of comfort, class, and exclusivity. For most, it was a sanctuary, an escape from the chaos of life. But tonight, it would become the setting for something much more than a staycation. Thomas Bennett stepped out of his sleek black SUV, adjusting his navy suit as he walked toward the entrance. His presence, commanding and confident, caught the attention of a few passers-by. At 6'2", with a posture that exuded authority, Thomas was not someone who went unnoticed. The cold rain didn't bother him. It barely touched the polished fabric of his jacket as he made his way into the lobby. Inside, the lobby was serene, almost quiet, save for the soft hum of conversations and the clicking of heels across the marble floors. Thomas smiled to himself, appreciating the elegance of the space. This was the type of environment he thrived in, where attention to detail was paramount and every little thing was designed for comfort and. He approached the front desk, where a young man named Kyle stood. The clerk barely glanced up from his keyboard as he continued typing. "Good evening," Thomas said warmly, his tone smooth and approachable. "I'd like to get a room for the night. My flight was delayed." Without looking up, Kyle responded coldly, "Sorry, sir, we're fully booked." His fingers didn't stop typing, and his voice had an edge that didn't seem particularly apologetic. Thomas paused, noticing the calm in the lobby, with only a handful of guests milling about. His brows furrowed slightly as he asked, "Fully booked? Not even one room?" Kyle didn't even seem to register the shift in Thomas's tone. "That's right," he answered, his voice dismissive. But Thomas wasn't convinced. He glanced around the lobby again, then back at Kyle, his expression neutral, yet sharp. The receptionist's smile was tight as he turned to greet another couple that had just entered. The contrast was stark. No hesitation, no excuse, just a smooth exchange of pleasantries as they were handed a room key. Thomas's mind began to click. It wasn't about the lack of rooms. It was something far more personal, and the realization stung. He stood there for a moment, processing the subtle yet unmistakable bias that had been presented. But instead of reacting immediately, he chose to remain calm. This wasn't the time for an outburst. Not yet. Thanking Kyle for his time, Thomas turned on his heel and walked out, the cool rain hitting his face, but somehow it didn't feel as cold as the treatment he had just received. Outside, the rain had picked up, now a steady downpour that blurred the outlines of the streets. Thomas stood for a moment under the awning, his thoughts focused but calm. He didn't need to raise his voice or react rashly. Instead, he quietly watched the revolving doors of the hotel, eyes narrowing as he considered what had just unfolded. The dismissive treatment wasn't just about a room. It was about something deeper, something insidious. As he stood there, observing the familiar flow of guests entering and exiting, a young man walked in. His hoodie was soaked, his backpack slung loosely over one shoulder. He had the worn, travel-fatigued look of someone who had been on the road for hours. Thomas watched as he approached the front desk, mirroring his earlier request for a room. The exchange that followed was quick, effortless, and polite. The young man was handed a key with a bright smile and an invitation to enjoy his stay. Thomas's lips pressed into a thin line. His suspicions had been confirmed. The earlier incident hadn't been an oversight or a mistake. It had been intentional. He felt the weight of the rejection not just on his own shoulders, but as a message about how people like him were often treated. The young man's hoodie, his worn appearance, it was all too obvious. The hotel staff, despite their polished facade, had made a decision based on assumptions. Prejudice had silently played its part in how the interactions unfolded. But Thomas was not just a victim of this situation. He had the power to do something about it. His mind raced through his options, quickly calculating his next steps. His first instinct was to storm back in there, confront the staff, and demand an explanation. But decades in business had taught him something far more valuable than explosive reactions: timing and strategy. He wasn't here to make a scene, he was here to make a statement. Stepping back into his car, Thomas rolled down the window, letting the cool air refresh his mind. The hotel, with its pristine exterior and polished reputation, held more than just a few stains. The question was how far Thomas was willing to go to remove those stains and expose the truth. He didn't need to scream, he didn't need to shout. He was in control, and tonight he would remind them that actions, especially ones rooted in prejudice, had consequences. As the tires rolled over the wet pavement, Thomas's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, the idea for how to handle this situation finally clicking into place. It was no longer about a room or a small inconvenience. It was about reshaping the very culture of an establishment that thought it could get away with this kind of treatment. This was bigger than him. It was about making sure no one else would have to endure the same. Tonight that would change. The rain had softened by the time Thomas parked his car in front of Sandy's 24/7 Eats, a modest diner tucked away on a side street. The neon sign outside flickered, casting a warm red glow over the puddles in the parking lot. Thomas walked inside, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the humble atmosphere. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air, grounding him after the unsettling events at the hotel. He sat and took in the public area. As he slid into a booth by the window, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. This was where he needed to be. Not in the sterile, high-end environment of the Grand Horizon, but in a place that served real people, not just customers with deep pockets. He unfolded his laptop, the screen glowing softly in the dim light of the diner, and started typing quickly. He wasn't just working on business, he was drafting a plan. The Grand Horizon Hotel might have been a small piece of his empire, but tonight it was the catalyst for something far bigger, something personal. He'd spent years building his fortune with sharp decisions, but he'd always done so from a distance, carefully observing, carefully calculating. Tonight, though, it wasn't just about the bottom line, it was about ethics, fairness, and accountability. Thomas wasn't just going to buy the hotel, he was going to change it, turn it into a symbol of what hospitality should be, a place of equality, respect, and integrity. Within minutes, he dialed Sarah Clark, his attorney. He needed her to act quickly. The Grand Horizon wasn't just another acquisition, it was a statement, and he wanted it to be a statement that could be felt by everyone, from the employees to the guests. The message would be clear. No one would be treated like that again, especially not under his watch. Thomas didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. His mind raced, outlining the specifics of the deal, the logistics, the legalities. He reviewed documents, calculated potential outcomes, and then, with a few quick strokes of his keyboard, sent the final documents to Sarah. The hotel was his. The next morning, before sunrise, the paperwork would be finalized, and the new chapter for the Grand Horizon Hotel would begin. As the diner emptied and the clock ticked into the early hours of the morning, Thomas leaned back in his booth, his mind clear. He wasn't angry. Anger, he knew, was a waste of energy. What mattered now was the action he was about to take. He wouldn't let that moment, the rejection, the prejudice, slide by. It wasn't just about righting a wrong. It was about showing everyone that fairness would always have a place, even in the most unexpected of situations. By the time the sun broke through the clouds, casting its light over the city of Naples, the deal was done. Thomas had made a decision, one that would forever alter the course of his investment, but more importantly, it would change the Grand Horizon Hotel into something it had never been before. He was determined to make sure that no one, especially not because of their appearance, would ever face the humiliation Margaret had suffered again. The following morning, Thomas stood in front of the Grand Horizon Hotel, watching the early morning light shimmer against the building's sleek glass facade. There was no mistaking it. The hotel was a symbol of wealth and exclusivity, but it was a symbol built on a foundation of unequal treatment, and that was about to change. As he entered the hotel, the usual air of polished professionalism met him, but now he knew it was just a veneer, covering up the lack of real integrity beneath. He had a point to prove, and he wasn't about to waste any time. Thomas walked through the lobby, nodding politely at the staff who scurried about, their eyes subtly following his movements. He wasn't an unknown face here. But the change in his role from a distant observer to the owner was about to become evident to everyone who worked here. The staff was going to learn that things were different now. The culture that Kyle and others had upheld was no longer acceptable. He approached the front desk where Kyle stood, his demeanor still cool, his expression a mix of politeness and practiced indifference. Thomas Bennett observed the man for a moment before speaking, his voice calm but firm. "Good morning, Kyle. I trust you're well this morning." Kyle's forced smile faltered as he recognized Thomas, but he quickly masked it with a practiced professionalism. "Good morning, sir. How can I assist you?" Thomas leaned forward slightly, his gaze never leaving Kyle's. "I'm here to make an announcement," he said, slipping a folder of papers onto the desk. The sharp edges of the folder cut through the tension in the room like a knife. The staff in the lobby seemed to instinctively pause, their heads turning as if they knew something was about to unfold. Kyle's eyes flickered nervously, his calm exterior beginning to crack. "I am the new owner of this hotel," Thomas said, his voice deliberate. "And as of this morning, we are going to make some changes. The first one begins with you." He didn't wait for a response, letting the weight of his words sink in. The air around them seemed to thicken, the quiet murmur of the staff now a muted hum. Thomas didn't glance around. His eyes remained fixed on Kyle, studying him, seeing the man's discomfort in his shifting stance, the sweat on his brow. "Last night," Thomas continued, his voice unwavering, "I experienced firsthand what your brand of hospitality really looks like. I'd say I'm unimpressed, but that's an understatement." Kyle opened his mouth as if to speak, but Thomas held up a hand to stop him. "You see, Kyle, actions speak louder than words, and yours last night spoke volumes. I won't tolerate prejudice of any kind in my business, and I don't expect to have to explain this again." The rest of the staff exchanged uncertain glances, their faces unreadable. Thomas could feel their eyes on him, a mix of curiosity and fear. He wasn't angry, he was focused. He knew that the only way to change the culture here was to lead by example and show that unethical behavior would have consequences. "This hotel," Thomas said, turning to address the staff as a whole, "is going to be a place where everyone is treated with dignity. It starts with me, but it won't end with me." He paused, allowing his words to settle. "For those who are willing to rise to this challenge, you have a place here. For those who aren't, I suggest you find work elsewhere." Thomas took a deep breath before turning back to Kyle, his eyes steady. "You're dismissed, Kyle. Consider this your last day. Pack up and don't bother coming back." Kyle stood still, a mix of shock and anger flashing in his eyes, but he said nothing. Thomas could see the humiliation sinking in, the realization that he had just lost everything he had worked for with one reckless act. Without another word, Kyle left the front desk, his departure leaving behind an uneasy silence. Thomas remained standing, his posture straight and unyielding, but inwardly he felt a sense of resolve settling in. This was just the beginning. The foundation had been laid, and now it was time to build something different, something that would reflect his values, his commitment to respect, and his belief in fairness. The staff, though apprehensive, seemed to exhale collectively, the tension in the room easing. Thomas knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was a road he was ready to walk. The Grand Horizon Hotel was about to undergo a transformation that would ripple through the business and change it for the better. As he watched Kyle disappear through the back door, Thomas allowed himself a brief, quiet moment of satisfaction. He wasn't just changing a hotel, he was changing the way people viewed what true hospitality could be. The days following Kyle's dismissal brought a quiet yet significant shift in the Grand Horizon Hotel's atmosphere. Thomas could feel the change ripple through the corridors, through the walls, and into the hearts of the staff. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, it was more like the steady process of turning a key in a lock that had long been stuck. The hotel's old culture was crumbling, and the new one was slowly being built, brick by brick. Daniel Kyle was the tenant now. He had done Gallic sandwiches, wearing a monkey cassock, treating his employees like crap. Thomas wasn't one to sit idly by and let things happen on their own. He wasn't the kind of leader who gave orders from an ivory tower. He had always believed that true leadership required being present, being involved, and above all, being honest. So, he took it upon himself to work alongside his staff, overseeing the renovations and engaging with everyone, from the housekeepers to the managers. He wanted them to know that change wasn't just about rules, it was about hearts and minds. Sophia, the young concierge who had looked so nervous on his first day, was quickly becoming a star. She embodied the values he wanted to instill in the hotel. Her empathy was unmatched, her attention to detail impeccable, and her ability to connect with guests was something he admired deeply. After the first few weeks of transformation, Thomas knew she was the perfect fit for assistant manager. "Sophia," he called one morning as she passed by, holding a stack of guest forms. "How are the new training sessions going?" She smiled, her face lighting up with pride. "They're incredible, Mr. Bennett. It's not just about customer service anymore. We're learning how to truly engage with people, respect their differences, and make them feel welcome, no matter who they are." Thomas nodded, pleased by her response. "That's the goal," he said. "It's not just about what's polite, it's about what's right." As the weeks went by, Sophia's influence began to spread. She worked closely with Thomas to create training workshops focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. These weren't dry textbook sessions, they were discussions. They were about confronting biases head-on, acknowledging past mistakes, and exploring how to move forward as a team. The staff was hesitant at first, unsure if they could truly change, but Sophia's sincerity and Thomas's commitment gave them the courage to try. Thomas could see the results. The guests began to notice the difference as well. The reviews, once filled with critiques about the hotel's exclusive atmosphere, now overflowed with praise. Guests remarked not only on the beautiful accommodations, but on the warmth and care of the staff. It was no longer just a place to sleep, it had become a place where people felt at home, where they felt seen. And for Thomas, that was the greatest victory of all. But, as always, there were challenges. Not everyone embraced the change. Some of the more entrenched staff members, those who had been with the hotel long before Thomas arrived, found it hard to adjust. There were murmurs in the halls, moments of resistance that Thomas had to confront head-on. He couldn't afford to let even a single ounce of prejudice linger, not when he had made such a public commitment to creating an inclusive environment. One afternoon, Thomas noticed an older bellhop, a man named Jack, looking uncomfortable during a training session. Thomas could sense the unease in his body language as Jack shifted from foot to foot, his arms crossed tightly across his chest. After the session ended, Thomas approached him. "Jack," he said, quietly, "I've noticed you've been a little quiet in the last few sessions. Is something bothering you?" Jack hesitated, glancing around as if to make sure no one was listening. Thomas regarded him carefully, his voice soft but firm. "Jack, I understand it's not easy. Change rarely is, but I'm asking you to trust me. This isn't just about a new policy or a program. It's about creating a place where every guest feels like they belong. You're a part of this team, and I need your help to make it work." Jack didn't respond immediately, but Thomas could see the gears turning in his mind. It was a slow process, but he could see that the man was beginning to come around. That's how change happened after all, not in one grand gesture, but in countless quiet moments like this one. Thomas knew the road ahead would be filled with obstacles. Some would resist, some would misunderstand. But he also knew that, piece by piece, he was creating something that could outlast him, a legacy not just of business success, but of a community built on respect and inclusivity. And that was something worth fighting for. As the weeks wore on, the Grand Horizon Hotel's transformation reached its zenith. What had once been a symbol of exclusivity, of privilege hidden behind polished walls, was slowly becoming a beacon of inclusivity, of true hospitality that embraced everyone, regardless of their background. The change wasn't simply in the decor or the new training sessions, it was in the very air of the hotel, in the attitudes of the staff, and in the warmth of the guests who walked through the doors. Thomas Bennett watched as his vision took root, but he was not the kind of leader to sit back and rest on his laurels. He stayed active, checking in with staff members, listening to feedback, and making sure that the hotel's newfound spirit wasn't lost in the hustle of daily operations. His presence had a quiet authority, a reminder that the mission of the hotel had to remain intact. It was a commitment, not just to business, but to people, to those who walked through the hotel's doors looking for more than just a place to stay, but a place where they were seen and respected. Sophia, his assistant manager, had blossomed in her role. Her natural empathy and growing confidence had turned her into a trusted leader within the team. She had an uncanny ability to connect with guests, making them feel like they were more than just customers, they were family. Thomas had no doubt that she would continue to be the beating heart of the hotel for years to come, and he planned to be involved in her development from that day on. But with the good came the inevitable pushback. While the majority of the staff embraced the change, some remained silent in their discontent, unwilling to adjust to the new standards. Jack, the bellhop who had once been hesitant about the transformation, now showed signs of resistance, even after months of training. Thomas could sense his reluctance. There was a defensiveness in Jack's posture, a tightness in his jaw whenever diversity and inclusion were discussed. One evening, as the hotel was bustling with guests, Thomas decided it was time to have a one-on-one with Jack. He found the bellhop in the back hallway, stacking luggage. "Jack, can we talk for a minute?" Thomas asked, his voice soft but direct. Jack's hands paused mid-support, and he looked up, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "Of course, Mr. Bennett." Thomas stepped closer, leaning against the wall. "You've been with us for a while now, and I can see the work you've put in. But I also know this change hasn't been easy for you. Is something on your mind?" Jack shifted uncomfortably. His eyes flickered toward the bustling lobby, but he didn't say anything for a moment. Finally, his voice came, rough and low. "I'm not one for all this sensitivity training and talk about fairness. I've been working in this business for decades, and it's always been about who can pay for the room, not who you are." Thomas nodded, his gaze steady. "I get it, Jack. Change is hard, but this isn't just about fairness. It's about dignity. It's about showing every guest that they matter, no matter what they look like, how much money they have, or where they come from." Jack's expression softened, and he looked away, his hand rubbing the back of his neck. "It's just hard to see it. I've seen a lot, and sometimes it feels like this whole world is changing too fast." Thomas took a step forward, putting a hand on Jack's shoulder. "The world doesn't change overnight, but we have to change with it. We can't ignore what's happening around us. This hotel, this team, it's about creating a place where people can feel good about who they are. And if you want to stay a part of it, you have to let go of the past, Jack." There was a long silence between them. Then Jack gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "I'll try, Mr. Bennett." Thomas gave him a reassuring smile. "That's all I ask." The conversation wasn't a solution in itself, but it was a start. Thomas knew that real change required patience, compassion, and sometimes even confrontation. The journey was long, and there would be more hurdles ahead, but the commitment to creating a space where respect and dignity were the foundation was unwavering. As Thomas stood there in the quiet of the back hallway, watching Jack walk away with a hesitant but genuine expression, he felt the weight of the moment settle in. It was a small victory, but victories were made of small moments. Every step forward was progress. Every dialogue was a seed planted for change. The Grand Horizon Hotel was no longer just a business. It was a living, breathing example of what could happen when people took a stand for what was right. It was about embracing the uncomfortable, confronting prejudice, and forging a path toward a better future. As the hotel continued to thrive, Thomas knew one thing above all else. Change didn't happen by staying silent. It happened when people were willing to speak up, to challenge the status quo, and to demand better. And that was a lesson he would carry with him, not just as a businessman, but as a human being, for the rest of his life. The story of Thomas and the transformation of the Grand Horizon Hotel serves as a powerful reminder of how we can challenge the status quo and create meaningful change. In today's world, we are often faced with situations where prejudice or exclusion persists, sometimes subtly or overtly. Thomas's decision to take action, not out of anger but with focused determination, offers a valuable lesson. When we encounter injustice, it is our responsibility to stand up and speak out. In our daily lives, we can apply this approach by being more mindful of our actions and the actions of others. Whether in the workplace, at school, or in social settings, creating an environment where everyone feels respected and valued should be a priority. It's important to confront our own biases and challenge those around us to do the same. This could be through initiating conversations about diversity and inclusion, being an ally to those who are marginalized, or simply holding ourselves and others accountable for behaviors that perpetuate inequality. Thomas also teaches us the importance of leading by example. True leadership isn't just about authority, it's about fostering growth, learning, and compassion. By creating space for others to evolve, just as Thomas did with his staff, we contribute to a culture of respect and mutual understanding. Change can be uncomfortable, but like Thomas, we should recognize that growth requires action, courage, and the willingness to make a stand for what is right. Every small step we take toward inclusivity and fairness has the potential to ripple outward, creating a more equitable world for all.